Day 4 in Grenada, series defeat for England. This is Ask George. George, I'm amazed you've still got the energy to do that after what's happened in this test match. But let's kick off with a question from Rob Kearsey. Is there a heavy dose of denialism running through this England team? I think Rob is talking about the reactions on the interview in the immediate aftermath of this defeat in Grenada.
Yeah, there is. But to be fair, that might be the only card left they've got to play. But yeah, it does feel that they're in denial. They keep talking about, they're just about to turn a corner. It doesn't feel like that, does it? There's not really any evidence of that. So I think that's probably the case. You asked me, I think yesterday, about what I would do about the captaincy, and I've been always saying I would stick with Joe Root, but I was not particularly impressed by him today, particularly as he seemed quite defensive. And he said a couple of times, I think I've answered enough questions about my captaincy. Well, I think if you set a record for winless series in succession, you're going to get lots of questions about whether you are the right person to be captain. Yes, but the sheer horror of how bad things are is probably quite difficult for them to accept. But that's probably what they have to do to improve.
I mean, can you have any sympathy with Joe Root in this circumstance and the answers that he gave today?
Yeah, Lord, yeah, of course. I think he's got an impossible job. I don't think their resources are there. I still think he's probably the best person for the role. It's him or Ben Stokes, as far as I'm concerned. And I've always thought that Mike Brearley's record, fellow columnist at the Cricketer, of course. I always thought his record as a captain was slightly overrated, and Ian Botham's was slightly underrated, because Brearley never captained against West Indies, and Ian Botham captained massively against West Indies, and they were incredibly good. And Brearley also captained quite a lot against Packer-era Australia. So there are lots of reasons why the records are very reliant. Captaincy records are very reliant upon the resources, and Joe Root does not have great raw resources in that side.
There's a few questions that we're going to get through here on the sort of captaincy or related to the captaincy. The next one, which touches on it, is from Neil Manship, who's asked, who will be England's MD, coach and skipper on June the 2nd, which is the first day of the first test against New Zealand at Lord's?
MD, well, I guess Marcus North is possibly favourite right now, but there's a few candidates. Coach, maybe Tom Moody, maybe Justin Langer. I don't know. Captain, I think Ben Stokes.
So you think that there will be a change of captaincy in time for the summer?
I think so. I'm not saying that I would do that, but I feel it much less strongly today than I did yesterday that Root was the right person to take it on, because I thought he had a poor day. But lots of the candidates I'm hearing touted are not realistic in my view. Having said that, it's probably Root or Stokes, isn't it, the answer to that question? But it is just about possible that anything could happen. We had that period of the 80s of 4 captains in a series, one of them in Cowdrey. Something like that could happen, I suppose. But it seems unlikely.
Do you feel that Root needs to resign rather than be sacked? You've touched on this written today in the piece, saying that Stokes you don't feel necessarily would take it on if Root was sacked. Is that a bit of an internal diplomacy situation that also has to be thought about in the context of the wider captaincy question?
I think Ben and Joe are probably genuinely very good friends, and there's a lot of loyalty there. It's a really good quality, isn't it? I think Ben Stokes would be uncomfortable with that scenario where he's seeming to benefit from the misfortune of a friend. So if Joe Root stood down, if he said, I've had a really good run, I'm tired, someone else could have a go, and I'm looking forward to supporting Ben, it would be quite easy for him to say, fair play, it's my turn to pick up this role and to run with it. I think if Joe Root was sacked, and he clearly doesn't want to give it up at the moment, it might be more difficult. Having said that, that is how sporting teams work, and it doesn't mean that it's impossible that they can just get on with it and work together very happily. I'm sure they will continue to be friends, whatever happens. But I just think that I don't think Ben Stokes is canvassing for the job at all. I don't think that's the case at all, and I do think he could do it. Look, the question, there are lots of reasonable questions about Ben Stokes as captain. For one thing, I think he might overbowl himself because he'll take on too much responsibility, Flintoff style. And for another, he this time last year, was it basically, he had taken time out. So it's only a few months since he came back, less than 6 probably, is it about 6 months? Since he returned to the game, having had a break to look after his mental and physical health. So without knowing exactly how he is on that front, and those are quite personal matters, aren't they? It's hard to make an informed decision on what's the right way to go there. But in many ways, I still think Joe Root is the best person for the job, but it's just not a great field of candidates.
My impression is that you feel that way across the board for coach and MD, not just for captain, that the general quality of candidacy for this is not high.
No, I think there are really good candidates for the coaching role. It's just not many of them are English.
Does that
so
matter?
There's something the matter with the English game, but it's not producing leaders. It's not really producing. I think I'm just going to end that sentence. It's not really producing.
Is that producing Red Bull leaders, Red Bull strategists, Red Bull administrators? Is it to a point where we have to define between the two? Is there an argument for saying there are White Bull leaders and there are White Bull strategists available in the English game?
Maybe, but to be honest, it's an easier game. The White Bull game is easier. People will dispute that, but the way that England play it these days, they play it on pitches and with balls that don't really move laterally. It takes an awful lot of difficulty out of the equation. So it is easier to go out there and just, they're in 5th gear pretty much every ball, aren't they? They did really well to win the World Cup, but they wouldn't have won it without Jofra Archer, I don't think. They didn't do anything to produce Jofra Archer. He was a lottery winner, the cricketer.
That is a fair point. Actually, there's a question that invokes a lottery analogy later on, but let's get to one more on the captaincy from Reese Bob, who asks, out of current county captains, who could come in and do a good job with England?
What do you mean by a good job? Do you mean what do you mean? Do you mean they'd be competent? I mean, if you pick a batter, so Tom Abel averages 32 at first class level. And he hasn't played on the most difficult pitches in county cricket, although, Taunton's changed over the years. It's asking a lot for him to come in and play better than some of those other people who have been selected, particularly as, you would think that he was a middle order player. So what is he competing with? Johnny Bairstow, Joe Root, Ben Stokes? Really?
Sort of he's a batting all-rounder, isn't he?
He's a batting all-rounder. He's a useful bowler. He reminds me as a cricketer of Darren Maddy, and it's not faint praise. I think Tom Abel's a really good cricketer. I'm a Somerset supporter. But the other thing is, Somerset are still waiting for that championship win. I mean, it's not like picking Dermot Reeve might have been, or even Mark Lane in white ball cricket, certainly. A few years ago, who had an undeniably strong record of work as a leader. Doesn't really seem like that. I see good things in Tom Abel, and maybe he'll step up. But, you're putting a lot of pressure on the guy because he hasn't demanded selection as an individual. Sam Billings, people are talking about. Again, lots to like, but, he's played one test. It's putting him under a lot of pressure. You're actually potentially weakening the side by picking someone who doesn't demand selection as an individual. And it doesn't look like a team that could take a lot of weakening. So are there people who could come in and be good with the media, be good ambassadors for the game? Yep. that Joe Root does those things terrifically well. Are there people who would come in and improve the performance and lead England up the Test Championship table? I don't really see that, if I'm honest, no. But again, you see, this is what I said to you yesterday. We're blaming the captain, just like we blamed the director of cricket and the coach a few months ago. We keep sacking people because we're looking for quick fixes and scapegoats. It's the system. You know, if your car breaks down, you don't just sack the taxi driver. I think that's a rubbish analogy. There might be one in there somewhere. I should just stick to Titanic.
Well, I'm going to move on slightly just to get away from that analogy mainly. The question comes from PL, who's asking, is there more chance of winning the lottery than guessing England's first Test team in June?
Yeah, I mean, how many numbers do you need for the lottery? Is it 6?
I don't know.
No, and presumably they're going to play 11. Look, I think you could probably get halfway there, more than halfway there. But yeah, you'd be guessing about the opening batters, wouldn't you? And you'd probably be guessing about the opening bowlers. So that's the first 4 names of the team sheet you're struggling with. You don't know who's captain. You don't know who's keeping wicket. You don't know if they're playing a spinner. I mean, Ben Stokes is there, isn't it? Yeah, good question. I haven't got a clue. Joe Root's there, you know.
Surely Saqib Mahmood is now there as well.
Who? Sorry, Saqib.
Yeah, Mahmood,
Saqib. Yeah, I mean, let's let's keep that in a bit of perspective. But he's looked promising. All I would say is he reminds me a bit of Zach Crawley, in that they both look as if they're really talented players with exciting futures who should probably be learning their game at county level. They've both been picked before they finished article, certainly. You say when someone like Jonathan Trott would be a really good example. When he was picked to play for England, he was the finished article.
Again, this comes back to the system, doesn't it? That it's not producing.
It comes back to the system again and again. Yeah.
Next question, Philip Sterling. England would have still lost this series with Broad and Anderson. Change my mind.
No, I'm not going to change your mind. What were they bowled out for? So this is what people kept saying in the Ashes. That, Broad didn't play in, well, neither of them played in Brisbane. And people forget that Jimmy Anderson wasn't fit. They were bowled out for, was it 147 or something? The batting's poor as well as the bowling. They may have, the experiment with moving beyond them and seeing what was there didn't really work, did it? You'd have to say it didn't work. Did England take a new ball wicket? Certainly Chris Wokes didn't. I think they probably did in the second innings in Barbados. But it may have been the third new ball, crikey. But there were times when you would imagine that Joe Root would have loved to throw the ball at either one of them. But there's a lot of evidence at times where they've struggled on the sort of wickets that England encountered here. So let's not, build up their skills beyond what they are at this stage of their career. Obviously fantastic bowlers, but these were very, very slow wickets. And it wasn't like as if other people making the ball swing around corners or anything. So who knows? I think on merit they still will get in this side, but I think that I'm not going to try and talk you out of the point. I think England still would have lost this series because they still would have been bowled out cheaply. And actually, one of the people who would have played is Saqib.
Tom Hunt asks, is it now time to disband the ECB and replace it?
Well, you're just going to replace it with something else that's very similar, aren't you?
Well, I think we've sort of summarised the lengthy question there, and he talked about a sort of Cricket England body, which didn't go into a huge amount of detail. Obviously, it's only a tweet; you've only got 240 characters. But it was talking, I guess, about changing the different levels at which the governing body can operate and giving it different remits and stuff like that.
Maybe. I think the next edition of the Cricketer magazine focuses on just these questions. But I haven't really had a huge chance to think about that yet. But you're going to end up with a governing body that doesn't look massively different. I think maybe the problem has been the people at the top of it. I think there was a very poor chair who left about 18 months ago, whatever it was. And I think the current chief executive's legacy is going to be running out of money and England being bottom of the World Test Championship. I mean, I think if you improve the chief exec and chair, things would look better very, very quickly. You're always going to end up with a governing body, which you have to have. You don't want government interference in our sports, I don't think. In fact, it's an ICC regulation. You can't. Whether there have to be more checks and balances, I actually think they do. I think that we've seen that because of the inclusion racism crisis. And there are all sorts of questions to be asked about the independence of the Cricket Disciplinary Committee, or whatever it's called, commission. But you're always going to end up with a governing body that looks a little bit like this. You could just have a better one.
Let's try and sort of finish towards something a little bit more optimistic. And Mike Andrews asks, what are the reasons to be positive about England going forward?
Well,
God, that's such a long pause. Such a long pause.
Well, it's a great game still. Well, I'll tell you reasons to be positive today, but I'm adapting the question. It was lovely to see the crowd in the stadium in Grenada celebrate. Lord, they celebrated. They celebrated noisily for hours. I mean, they probably still are. That was great. It mattered, and it reminded me of being in Dhaka when Bangladesh beat England. It's a big deal. It's kind of lovely to see. Much easier to take, funnily enough, than watching Australia celebrate. Maybe I've seen too much of that. They've ruined my childhood. Now they're ruining my life. So that was great. The myth that people in the Caribbean have sort of moved on from cricket or something. It's not true. So that was really good. There were actually a lot of local people in the ground over the last couple of days, certainly outnumbered the England support. Really great to see the West Indies team thank the supporters of both sides, by the way. So in the grand scheme of things, that's kind of brilliant. We still have a great game. I still retain a great deal of confidence in Test cricket because it's probably as entertaining as it's ever been in the last few years. And, with a competent governing body and a governing body that really cares about the long format, things could be turned around quite quickly. In terms of the more short-term stuff, I mean, I've got huge doubts about the ability of, well, not the ability, the Jofra Archer's fitness we have doubts about. No, we have to have doubts about whether, if I was his mum or dad, would I be recommending he play Test cricket again, or would you? No. And the answer is your heart says, oh, I'd love him to. And your head says, well, if that was me, would I? And
protect an income.
Who could play him if he doesn't? And to some extent with Mark Wood, the same thing. I mean, I guarantee Mark Wood will come back and try and play Test cricket because he's mad for it. And I think Jofra will too. But the fact is that those players are, have question marks against them, and they've been very, very important. I don't see massive amounts of talent coming through. I do see difficult series coming up. Things could be turned around. I think I said this yesterday. Things can be turned around quite quickly. We saw how quickly the white ball game moved direction, and I think it could happen in red ball cricket too after a little bit of a while. So it's all about prioritising and resources. But the big thing to be positive about is we have a great game. The reason to be optimistic really is we still have a great game, and actually we just get more people to see it. I'm very confident that more people will fall in love with it. The more people fall in love with it, we'll have a bigger pool of players and spectators to choose from. Not that we choose spectators, but you get what I'm saying. So that's the real reason for optimism. But yeah, English cricket's at a low ebb. I think it's at the lowest ebb that I've ever known it. It needs surgery.
Well, George, thanks for all of your pieces from out in the Caribbean, and you're coming home soon.
Oh Lord, is it the end of a Caribbean tour? No reason for optimism at all.
Yeah.
The other thing, we are. It's the start of a new county season. I mean, if you can't be a bit optimistic and cheerful in spring in England, you really are in a sorrowful state, aren't you? So there's always stuff to be optimistic about. But sorry to hear I'm having to come home.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. We can't stump any more expenses up, so you're going to have to catch a flight back. But don't worry, it's light until 7 here, and it's at least 16 degrees, so you'll be absolutely fine when you get back.
Nice. I'm looking forward to it. Genuinely, I'm looking forward to the start of the county season. Thanks. It's been fun. Thanks for the questions, everybody.